Today, we examine a remarkable historical document, the personal diary of Lieutenant Gerhard Linke, who served in the 185th Infantry Regiment, 87th Infantry Division of the Wehrmacht during the brutal winter campaign of 1941–42. Unlike many war memoirs written years after the fact, this diary provides an immediate, unfiltered view of the German Army's catastrophic defeat before Moscow. What we know of Linke comes primarily from his own words. He emerges as a young, well-educated officer torn between his admiration for military discipline and his growing disillusionment with the war's reality. A holder of 2 Iron Crosses for bravery on the Eastern Front, Linke possessed both courage and an increasingly critical eye toward German military leadership. The 87th Infantry Division stood at the spearhead of Army Group Center's drive toward Moscow, fighting at the junction between the Soviet 16th and 5th Armies. During the November offensive, they penetrated deeper into Soviet defenses than almost any other unit, reaching the Moscow-Volga Canal east of Istra. Despite suffering catastrophic losses during the winter of 1941–42, the division somehow maintained its combat effectiveness, continuing to fight until finally surrendering in the Courland Pocket after Berlin's fall in 1945. The Battle for Moscow, a turning point. Before delving into Linke's personal account, we must understand the historical significance of the Battle for Moscow. In my assessment, this stands as the most important battle of World War II, not Stalingrad, not Kursk, not D-Day, but Moscow. Why this controversial ranking? First, consider the scale. By December 5, 1941, approximately 2.8 million soldiers were engaged. Surprisingly, the Red Army was numerically inferior. Soviet forces, 1,100,000 soldiers, 7,250 guns and mortars, 770 tanks, 1,000 combat-ready aircraft. German forces, 1,700,000 soldiers, 13,500 guns and mortars, 1,100 tanks, 615 aircraft. The Wehrmacht fielded battle-hardened veterans who had conquered most of Europe. This represented the apex of German military power, experienced, confident, and seemingly invincible. After Moscow, Germany would never again possess such a qualitatively superior force. Had Moscow fallen, the consequences would have been catastrophic for the Soviet Union. Beyond the devastating psychological blow of losing Stalin's capital, Moscow served as the USSR's primary transportation hub. Its capture would have severed supply lines throughout the Soviet Union, leaving the Red Army unable to coordinate or supply effective resistance. Instead, the Red Army achieved what many thought impossible, inflicting the first major defeat on Hitler's Wehrmacht. The myth of German invincibility shattered in the Russian snow, giving hope not just to the Soviet people, but to all nations fighting the Axis. This victory proved that Nazi Germany could be beaten. The diary begins, prelude to Catastrophe, November 15, 1941. Linke's diary opens with deceptive calm. Colonel Karsten of the 461st Infantry Regiment took command of our sector this morning. We're moving to new quarters in the village of Arasevo. We'll rest until the offensive resumes. The whole regiment has assembled in the village. It is terribly crowded. November 16th, winter's beauty and terror. A beautiful sunny day. The snowy landscape with frosted trees and bushes is enchanting. Nevertheless, one can't think of it as absolute peace. We need to post strong sentries so that in this forested area we won't be caught unawares. Already, the contradictions of the Russian winter emerge, breathtaking beauty masking deadly danger. Lincoln notes the practical challenges. Twilight descends by 4 p.m. and it only gets light after 7:30 a.m. The shortened days would increasingly hamper German operations. The first casualties appear almost casually. Anti-tank and tank shells hit the outskirts of the village, one hitting a house, killing 2 soldiers and wounding many. After 7 weeks without mail, letters finally arrive, like a horn of plenty. Linke observes preparations for the coming offensive proceeding with absolute thoroughness, yet expresses the first hints of unease. It is somewhat disturbing. In the event the enemy burns the few villages, there will be nowhere for our troops to be housed and warmed. November 17th, 18th, the calm before the storm. The temperature drops to 9 degrees. Lincoln notes with concern, it has been enough for a few frosty days that illnesses and cases of frostbite have begun. Our fighting force was noticeably dwindling. Winter equipment arrives late and insufficient. After endless demands, several pairs of felt boots were finally received, one might say at the last minute. On November 18th, final preparations are made. Linke's entry captures the mixture of anticipation and dread. What awaits us tomorrow? How will the unaccustomed frost affect us? The day has come. We have to take part in the encirclement of Moscow. In doing so, we hope to get a strong position. In that case, it is possible that we will then be withdrawn or even released altogether. There are high expectations for the beginning of the battle. Operation Typhoon, the final push. November 19th, first day of battle. The offensive begins with immediate confusion. Maps prove so imprecise that it is almost impractical to use them. A neighboring unit loses direction in the snow-covered forest, entering the wrong village. Despite the chaos, initial success seems easy. We captured easy prey. We took many prisoners, destroyed 1 tank, and took many machine guns. But already, logistical nightmares emerge. Traffic jams form as units crowd the few available roads. Linke describes the breakdown of discipline. Some drivers and transport commanders should have been beaten. Discipline is not at all high in these units. November 20th, 21st, deceptive success. Initially, German forces advance rapidly. Linke's unit captures several villages with minimal casualties. In one engagement, over 250 Soviet soldiers are captured, while the Germans suffer only 2 wounded. We can hardly believe it, Linke writes. Yet ominous signs multiply. 4 Tigers are lost to minefields. Soviet rocket artillery. Stalin's organs, in soldier slang, begins its terrifying bombardment. Linke becomes ill, possibly from cold and exhaustion. I was not feeling well all day. I guess a cold was creeping up on me. November 22nd, 24th. The offensive stalls reality, intrudes harshly. Soviet resistance stiffens dramatically. T-34 tanks appear, impervious to German anti-tank weapons. Linke watches in horror as 1 T-34 charges directly through German infantry. The monster's turret appears to be jammed. In any case, He only fires his machine gun. He tries to crush them with his tracks. It can only be escaped by a nimble leap to the side. 1 or 2 soldiers die in a horrible way. Casualties mount relentlessly. Officers die, leading from the front. Equipment breaks down in the cold. By November 24th, Linke observes grimly, "With each passing day, the combat strength of the troops is weakening. While 14 days ago there were 70 men in a company, today there are only 40. Tomorrow there will be only 35. The high water mark, December weren't 2, touching distance from Moscow. German forces reach their furthest advance. From positions on high ground, they can see Moscow's outskirts. Linke stands at Lipki, gazing across the Moscow River Valley. The outlines of the next village, Ozyornoye, loom behind the haystacks. We can see movement there. The Wehrmacht has advanced over 1,000 kilometers since June, stands within 30 kilometers of the Kremlin, yet cannot advance another meter. Exhaustion, cold, and casualties have drained German strength past the breaking point. Colonel Karsten receives the Knight's Cross, recognition that brings little comfort to freezing, depleted units. December 35. The storm breaks. "It's crowded all day long," Linke writes of regimental headquarters. "Low-flying biplanes dropped leaflets around midday, but didn't do us any harm." The casual tone masks growing crisis. On December 4th, everything changes. Soviet forces attack Politsy village with overwhelming force. Heavy artillery turns the village into an inferno. Flames are beating from many houses. Heavy mines keep crumbling the village. T-34s lead the assault. Linke records the Wehrmacht's impotence. "With our medium tanks, we are powerless against these monsters." The temperature plummets to 26 degrees. Communications fail. In desperation, Linke heads toward the front. "There's a heavy cloud of smoke rising over Politsy. Our artillery overwhelms the enemy's scouted firing positions. It makes such noise in the air, as if a flock of wild geese had flown by." December 5th. Counteroffensive. December 5th, 1941. The date the tide turned. Stalin unleashes fresh Siberian divisions held in reserve. The exhausted, frozen Wehrmacht cannot hold. Linke's regiment suffers 11 killed and 34 wounded in a single day, with 19 severe frostbite cases. It was sadly regrettable that none of those who were sick or wounded and sent to the rear came back to the front line again. We are beginning to count gradually when the last man will be out of action, and there will be nobody to hold arms in their hands. The human cost becomes visceral. Some parts of your face whiten quickly, and you come back frost-bitten after a few minutes in the freezing cold. Retreat from Moscow. December 6 to 10, the line breaks. After smashing their heads against our position, the Reds turn to our neighbors. Soviet forces exploit every weakness, infiltrating through forests, attacking flanks, threatening encirclement. Linke witnesses the Wehrmacht's material poverty. The commanders do not have this understanding. At 30.5 degrees, you can't hold positions away from settlements, which means no possibility of getting warm. The diary entry for December 8th provides unexpected context. Japan has attacked Pearl Harbor. Linke sees potential benefits. This will be the beginning of open hostilities between America and us. Japan is definitively on the side of the Axis. Yet this strategic development means nothing to men freezing in inadequate shelters. December 11th to 15, catastrophic withdrawal. All units involved in construction of new positions. There's no material, not enough tools. It's painful to see how people without tools work in the frozen ground. The retreat becomes a rout. Linke describes biblical scenes of destruction. The flames light up the night sky. Communication poles had been blown up and large houses burnt down. Traffic jams stretch for kilometers as units flee westward. Discipline collapses. On December 15th, Linke witnesses the nadir. What a terrifying picture we see in front of us. Broken vehicles, scattered ammunition dropped in a hurry. What's disappointing is that we don't have sufficient hidden storage facilities. No one even cared to destroy it all. December 16th to 20th, scorched earth. Hitler's Stand Fast order arrives December 17th. No further retreat. This line must be held to the last man. But reality on the ground makes this impossible. Linke observes with disgust. Disgraced men wandering around like vagrants. The majority are soldiers without thorough training. The Wehrmacht implements scorched earth tactics, burning villages to deny shelter to advancing Soviets. All this to keep the advancing Reds from getting warm and finding supplies. Greedy tongues of flame devoured filthy huts. It is us or them. December 21st, 31. Christmas in hell. Working frantically to establish new defensive positions, German forces face critical shortages of everything: tools, wire, mines, winter clothing, food, ammunition. Horses starve and freeze. Frostbite casualties exceed combat losses. On Christmas Eve, Linke and fellow officers gather around a small Christmas tree. Everyone's thoughts, of course, turn to home and loved ones. They share a carefully preserved goose, French wine, and pudding sent by Linke's mother. Outside, Soviet rocket artillery maintains its bombardment. The year ends with bitter reflections. Only 104 replacements arrive, experienced men returning from hospitals, not fresh recruits. Linke notes acidly the difference between these veterans and soldiers who somehow arrived from supply depots. 1942, the endless winter. January, frozen stalemate. The new year brings no relief. Temperatures plummet to -40 degrees. Linke acquires lice, the universal plague of the Eastern Front. Every day I kill 2 or 3 of them, while most soldiers, regardless of rank, count these tormentors by the hundreds. Hitler assumes direct command of the army December 21st. Linke speculates, I suppose the reason is our retreat, but it never should have happened if we had been more diligent and timely with reinforcements. Supply systems collapse completely. Locomotives freeze. Roads vanish under snow. Horses eat straw from roofs, then starve. Food runs short. The bread portion has to be reduced. February, unraveling. By February 1942, Linke's regiment exists more on paper than reality. He tallies the December 2nd strength: 12 officers, 47 NCOs, 362 soldiers, less than half a battalion from a unit that should number 3,000. Soviet breakthroughs multiply faster than German reserves can respond. Engineers fight as infantry. Anti-aircraft guns engage tanks, Every specialist becomes a rifleman. On February 5th, alone in regimental headquarters, Linke reflects how much more suffering and hardship will befall us, how ferociously we fought in conditions so unusual for us. His final entries grow increasingly bitter about leadership failures. My commander is very hard to work with. I have no power to do anything without his permission on one hand, but on the other, he requires me to be independent. Grumpy as hell. February 17th, the end. The diary's last entry describes yet another crisis. Soviet forces breaking through neighboring divisions, T-34s appearing suddenly, positions crumbling. Linke mentions feeling unwell, taking quinine for fever. This is where the diary ends. He was killed near Smolensk, in the village of Osipovichi. We do not know the circumstances of his death. Analysis, anatomy of defeat. What Linke's diary reveals. Unlike post-war memoirs shaped by hindsight, Linke's contemporaneous account captures the Wehrmacht's transformation from confident conquerors to desperate survivors in real time. Several themes emerge: tactical superiority, strategic blindness. German forces consistently win local engagements yet lose the campaign. Linke's unit captures positions, inflicts disproportionate casualties, maintains tactical discipline, none of which matters against Soviet strategic depth and reinforcement capacity. Logistics determine everything. The diary obsessively catalogues shortages, winter clothing arriving late, ammunition running low, fuel freezing, horses starving. The Wehrmacht's lengthening supply lines from Germany prove fatal against Russia's transportation advantages. Technology versus mass. German military technology, radios, optics, combined arms tactics, initially dominates, but Soviet T-34s prove immune to German anti-tank weapons, while Stalin's organs terrorize with massed rocket barrages. Quality succumbs to quantity. Leadership failures compound. From Hitler's strategic miscalculations to regimental commanders' petty tyrannies, leadership failures cascade downward. Linke's bitter observations about rear area incompetence and his own commander's contradictions reveal an army eating itself. Human limits. The diary's most powerful passages describe human breakdown: frostbite turning limbs black, lice infestations, psychological trauma. Linke's cultured sensibilities, he quotes poetry, plans post-war education, make his descent into survival mode more poignant. The view from below Linke provides a grunt's eye view of catastrophe. While generals planned grand encirclements, he worried about frozen bread and functioning latrines. His concerns were immediate and practical. Why wasn't winter equipment pre-positioned? Why were specialists used as infantry? Why did supply convoys jam single roads? Why were positions abandoned without destroying equipment? These tactical questions illuminate strategic failure. The Wehrmacht invaded Russia with no serious preparation for winter warfare, no appreciation for Russian resilience, no contingency for failure. Linke's mounting frustration with authoritative statements about the power of the Red Army being deceptive reveals growing awareness that Nazi leadership had led them into disaster. Propaganda versus reality. The diary exposes the gulf between Nazi propaganda and frontline reality. While Goebbels proclaimed imminent victory, Linke counted dwindling ration strengths. While Hitler ordered no retreat, Linke described chaotic withdrawals. While Berlin claimed troops were well supplied, Linke watched comrades' feet turn black from frostbite. His bitter observation about newsreels showing fur coat distribution while frontline troops froze. A play worthy of regret. We ourselves were the victims, captures the growing alienation between Nazi leadership and Wehrmacht soldiers. The human cost continued. Beyond strategic analysis, Linke's diary remains a profoundly human document. His evolution from confident conqueror to exhausted survivor mirrors the Wehrmacht's larger trajectory. Early entries describe Russia's winter beauty and anticipation of glory. Later entries obsess over lice, frostbite, and dwindling food supplies. The cultured young officer who quotes romantic poetry gradually transforms into a bitter veteran focused solely on survival. The diary's most affecting passages describe small, human moments amid mechanized slaughter. Birthday mail arriving 7 weeks late. Officers sharing a hoarded goose on Christmas Eve. A model airplane gift that brought joy in a frozen dugout. Soldiers burning furniture to avoid frostbite, knowing they're destroying their only shelter. These details humanize history's abstraction. The battle for Moscow involved millions, but Linke reminds us it was fought by individuals who missed their families, got sick, made mistakes, and died one at a time, foreshadowing catastrophe. With hindsight, Linke's observations eerily foreshadow the Wehrmacht's ultimate destruction. His complaints about inadequate replacements, deteriorating discipline, and logistical collapse preview problems that would plague German forces through Stalingrad, Kursk, and the final defeats of 1944-45. His bitter notation about the best commanders trying to lead men forward with their own example are the first to die explains part of the Wehrmacht's qualitative decline. The German military tradition of leading from the front, admirable in principle, proved catastrophic in practice against an enemy willing to accept enormous casualties. Most prescient are Linke's observations about Soviet resilience. Despite initial German successes, he notices Red Army units improving, fresh Siberian divisions arriving, and Soviet equipment proving superior in winter conditions. His grudging respect for T-34 tanks and Stalin's organs acknowledges what Nazi ideology refused to admit. The subhuman Slavs had produced weapons superior to German engineering. The diary's historical value, primary source significance, Linke's diary provides irreplaceable ground-level perspective on one of history's most significant battles. While generals' memoirs and official histories record strategic movements, Linke captures war's texture, the smell of burning villages, the sound of rocket artillery, the sight of frostbitten limbs. His immediate reactions avoid post-war revisionism. Writing in December 1941, Linke couldn't know Moscow represented the beginning of Germany's long defeat. His mixture of confidence and growing doubt, tactical success and strategic failure provides authentic contemporary perspective. Challenging narratives. The diary complicates simple narratives about the Eastern Front. Linke emerges neither as Nazi fanatic nor reluctant conscript, but as a professional soldier increasingly disillusioned with leadership failures. His pride in military skill coexists with horror at war's reality. His casual mention of burning Russian villages reminds us that Wehrmacht participated willingly in scorched earth tactics, yet his disgust at abandoned equipment and breakdown of discipline reveals retained professional standards. This complexity makes Linke more historically valuable than either propaganda or purely critical accounts. Technical military details. For military historians, Linke provides invaluable tactical detail, engagement ranges and weapons effectiveness, impact of weather on operations, logistics requirements and failures, unit cohesion under extreme stress, communications breakdown in winter conditions, interaction between different service branches. His careful notation of temperatures, march times, casualty figures, and equipment losses creates a database for understanding winter warfare's practical challenges. Lessons and legacies, strategic lessons. The battle for Moscow demonstrated several enduring military principles. Never invade Russia. The Wehrmacht joined Napoleon's Grande Armée in learning this lesson expensively. Russia's strategic depth, climate extremes, and population resilience create unique challenges for invaders. Logistics trump tactics. Superior German tactical performance meant nothing when troops lacked winter clothes, vehicles froze, and supply lines stretched beyond capacity. Mass has quality. Soviet ability to replace losses while Germany could not proved decisive. The Red Army could afford to trade space for time and casualties for experience. Political interference destroys military effectiveness. Hitler's stand-fast order, while temporarily preventing complete collapse, ultimately increased casualties and prevented organized withdrawal to defensible positions. Human lessons. Beyond military teachings, Linke's diary offers timeless insights into human behavior under extreme stress. War's reality differs from its glorification. The young officer, eager for glory, becomes the veteran focused on survival. Combat's reality, lice, frostbite, arbitrary death, bears no resemblance to propaganda posters. Small comforts matter enormously. A letter from home, shared chocolate, or warm shelter assume existential importance when everything else strips away. Leadership quality determines unit survival. Linke's observations about good officers dying first, while incompetent commanders survived, explains much about military effectiveness. Ordinary people become capable of extraordinary endurance. Despite conditions that seem unsurvivable, Linke and his comrades continued functioning for months under appalling circumstances. The diary's end and historical impact. Linke's death. The diary ends abruptly in February 1942. Linke mentions feeling ill, taking quinine for fever. We know only that he died near Smolensk at Osipovichi, one of approximately 400,000 German soldiers who perished in the Moscow campaign. His death came as the immediate crisis passed, but before conditions significantly improved. The Wehrmacht stabilized its lines by March 1942, but Linke didn't survive to see this partial recovery. Like so many junior officers, he died at his post, probably still trying to hold together remnants of his unit. Discovery and preservation. The diary's survival represents minor miracle. Most personal documents from the Eastern Front were lost, destroyed in combat, rotting in Russian mud, or confiscated by Soviet forces. That Linka's diary reached us intact provides rare window into ordinary soldiers' experience. We don't know who preserved it, perhaps a comrade who retrieved his effects, or a family member who received it with his other belongings. Its eventual publication gives voice to thousands who experienced similar ordeals but left no record. Contemporary relevance. Why does a German lieutenant's diary from 1941 to 42 matter today? Several reasons argue for its continued relevance. Understanding leads to prevention. Detailed accounts of war's horror may help prevent future conflicts by stripping away glorification and revealing true costs. Individual experience illuminates great events. While we know Moscow's battle strategically, Linka shows us how it felt to participants. The cold, fear, exhaustion, and gradual realization of defeat. Professional military insights remain valid. Modern armies studying Linka's observations about logistics, morale, and winter warfare find lessons applicable to contemporary operations. Human testimony transcends sides. While Linke served an evil regime, his suffering and that of his comrades remains genuinely human. Understanding enemies as humans rather than monsters provides deeper historical comprehension. Comparing accounts, context, and corroboration. Other German diarists. Linka's account aligns with and diverges from other German veterans' memories. Like Wilhelm Prüller's diary, it shows initial confidence giving way to desperation. Both authors describe similar privations, inadequate winter equipment, starvation rations, and mounting casualties. Unlike some post-war memoirs that minimize Wehrmacht participation in atrocities, Linke matter-of-factly describes burning villages and scorched earth tactics. His contemporary account lacks the sanitization of later recollections. His technical observations match those of Panzer Commander Hans von Luck and others regarding Soviet equipment superiority, especially T-34 tanks' immunity to German anti-tank weapons. Soviet perspectives. Reading. Linke alongside Soviet accounts reveals war's universal horrors. Marshal Zhukov's memoirs describe the same battle from the commanding heights. Strategic movements, division deployments, operational planning. Linke shows these abstractions human cost. Soviet soldier accounts describe similar suffering: frostbite, starvation, equipment shortages. The Red Army's advantages lay not in superior conditions, but in shorter supply lines, climate adaptation, and defending homeland. Civilian memoirs from occupied territories provide essential context for Linke's casual mentions of requisitioning supplies and burning villages. What seemed military necessity to him meant starvation and homelessness for millions. Historical verification. Modern historians have verified most of Linke's factual claims. The 87th Infantry Division's movements match official records. Weather data confirms his temperature recordings. Casualty figures align with Wehrmacht archives. Equipment problems he describes appear throughout German military correspondence. This factual accuracy enhances the diary's value for understanding subjective experiences. If Linke reported temperatures and casualties accurately, we can trust his descriptions of morale and suffering. Final reflections. War's enduring lessons. The futility of aggressive war. Linke's diary ultimately demonstrates aggressive war's futility. The Wehrmacht's tactical excellence, the individual courage of soldiers like Linke, the initial victories, none prevented catastrophic defeat. The diary stands as unintentional testimony against the militarism that produced it. Nazi Germany's best troops, equipment, and commanders failed before Moscow, not through military incompetence, but because the entire enterprise was fundamentally flawed. No amount of tactical skill could overcome strategic delusion, logistical impossibility, and moral bankruptcy. Individual agency within systems. While serving an evil regime, Linke retained capacity for human observation and reflection. His diary reveals someone trapped within historical forces beyond control, yet maintaining professional standards and human empathy. This complexity challenges simple categories of victim and perpetrator. Linke participated willingly in aggressive war, yet suffered genuinely from its consequences. Understanding such complexity helps us comprehend how ordinary people become instruments of historical catastrophe. War's transformation of participants. The diary's greatest value may be its documentation of war's psychological impact. Linke's transformation from eager young officer, quoting poetry, to exhausted veteran obsessed with survival shows how extreme conditions reshape human personality. His growing cynicism about leadership, mounting frustration with systemic failures, and focus on immediate survival over ideological goals reveal war's corrosive effect on initial motivations. The idealistic lieutenant of June 1941 had become, by February 1942, someone interested only in keeping himself and his remaining men alive another day. Memory and history. Linke couldn't know his hastily scrawled entries would outlive him by decades, providing future generations insight into history's pivot point. His concerns were immediate: staying warm, finding food, maintaining communications. Yet these mundane details illuminate grand strategies' human cost better than any official history. Every war produces such documents, letters, diaries, memoirs, preserving individual experience within historical abstraction. Linke's diary joins this chorus of voices, reminding us that history happens to people, not statistics. Conclusion: a voice from the snow. Gerhard Linke died at 28, his life cut short in a war that would claim tens of millions. His diary ensures that at least one voice from the Wehrmacht's catastrophe before Moscow speaks across decades, telling us what it felt like to participate in one of history's greatest military defeats. Reading his words today, we glimpse war stripped of glory. Young men freezing in inadequate shelters, watching comrades die for unclear objectives, maintaining professional duty while losing faith in leadership. The confident officer who began his diary anticipating Moscow's quick capture became the bitter veteran who died still trying to hold impossible positions. His diary survives as both historical document and human testimony. As history, it provides irreplaceable ground-level perspective on the battle that broke Nazi Germany's offensive power. As testimony, it reminds us that even history's greatest events consist of individual experiences. A letter arriving late, frost-bitten fingers struggling to write, shared chocolate on Christmas Eve. The battle for Moscow involved millions and determined Europe's fate. But it was also Gerhard Linke shivering in a dugout, counting his remaining men, wondering when replacements would arrive, and writing by candlelight words that would outlive him. In preserving his words, we preserve not just military history, but human truth about war's reality. Linke's diary ends mid-sentence, fever overtaking him as Soviet forces pressed forward. He never lived to see Germany's defeat, never had the chance to reflect on his service, never knew his words would survive. Yet through historical accident, his voice reaches us from the snow-covered fields before Moscow, reminding us that history's grand narratives rest on individual shoulders, and that war's true cost is measured not in strategic movements, but in young men who never came home. In the end, perhaps that is Gerhard Linke's greatest legacy, not the tactical insights or historical details, valuable as they are, but the human voice speaking across decades, saying, "This is what it was really like. This is what war does to those who fight it. Remember us not as heroes or villains, but as people caught in history's machinery, doing our best to survive while the world burned around us." The diary of Lieutenant Gerhard Linke thus takes its place among the essential testimonies of World War II, a voice from the snow, forever frozen at the moment when Nazi Germany's expansion met its limits in the Russian winter and the long road to Berlin began. The discovery and preservation. How Linke's diary survived remains a minor miracle of documentary preservation. Found among his personal effects after his death, it somehow avoided destruction during the chaotic retreat, Soviet capture, or post-war disposal. A fellow officer, perhaps recognizing its historical value, may have carried it home, or it might have been mailed to family before Linke's final battle. The diary surfaced decades later in German archives, donated by unknown hands. Its authenticity was verified through multiple means. Handwriting analysis matched other documents in Linke's service record. Military details corresponded with official unit histories. Place names and dates aligned with known operations. Personal observations matched other contemporary accounts. Unlike post-war memoirs shaped by hindsight, the diary's immediate nature provides unfiltered access to events as experienced. Linke couldn't know Moscow would be the Wehrmacht's high water mark. He simply recorded another day's survival, unaware he was documenting history's pivot point. Comparative perspectives. Reading Linke alongside Soviet accounts of the same battle creates a stereoscopic view of historical events. Where Linke describes German suffering in the retreat, Soviet memoirs describe their own desperate defense and the exhilaration of finally driving back the invaders. Marshal Zhukov's memoirs describe the same December 5th counteroffensive from the opposite perspective. The enemy was exhausted and had no reserves. Our fresh Siberian divisions struck with full force. The psychological effect was as important as the material, showing both sides that the period of German victories had ended. A Soviet infantryman's diary from the same period notes, "The Germans run from us now. We find them frozen in their positions, their tropical uniforms stuffed with straw. They burn our villages but cannot warm themselves. Mother Russia's winter fights on our side. These complementary accounts reveal war's fundamental truth. Both sides suffer, both claim righteousness, both reduce opponents to stereotypes while experiencing common humanity in extremis. The German military memory. Within Wehrmacht veteran circles, Moscow remained a painful subject. Unlike Stalingrad, which became mythologized as heroic sacrifice, Moscow represented pure failure, poor planning, intelligence disasters, logistical incompetence. Veterans' accounts often blame Hitler's interference while minimizing their own complicity in aggressive war. Linke's diary complicates this narrative. His initial enthusiasm for the offensive and casual acceptance of invasion remind us that Wehrmacht officers were not merely apolitical professionals, but willing participants in Nazi aggression. His growing disillusionment reflects less moral awakening than professional frustration at incompetent leadership. Post-war German military histories long portrayed the Moscow defeat as a lost victory, claiming that but for Hitler's mistakes, or early winter, or Soviet numerical superiority, the Wehrmacht would have triumphed. Linke's contemporary account undermines such revisionism. The German army that reached Moscow's outskirts was already exhausted, undersupplied, and overextended. Victory was never possible, only degrees of defeat. Soviet historical narratives. In Soviet historiography, the battle for Moscow became the first chapter in inevitable victory. The successful defense validated Stalin's leadership, despite his earlier catastrophic errors, and proved Soviet system superiority. Individual suffering disappeared into collective triumph. Linke's diary humanizes the enemy in ways Soviet narratives avoided. His accounts of German suffering, frostbite, starvation, terror, complicate simple morality tales of evil invaders righteously destroyed. This doesn't diminish German criminality, but adds human dimension to historical events. Modern Russian historians, with access to previously closed archives, present more nuanced views. The Red Army's desperate state in November 1941, the massive casualties, even in victory, the crucial role of Lend-Lease aid, all receive franker treatment than Soviet-era histories allowed. Linke's observations about Soviet equipment and tactics often align with these revised assessments. Lessons for military professionals. Staff colleges worldwide study the Moscow campaign as a classic example of strategic overreach. Linke's tactical-level observations illustrate grand strategies, ground truth. Intelligence preparation. German intelligence catastrophically failed to identify Soviet reserves. Linke's shock at encountering fresh Siberian divisions reveals tactical surprise, reflecting strategic blindness. Logistical planning. The Wehrmacht's supply system, adequate for quick campaigns in compact European theaters, collapsed across Russian distances. Linke's constant supply complaints show logistics primacy over tactics. Environmental factors. Military planners must account for terrain and weather. Linke's descriptions of equipment failing in extreme cold demonstrate technology's environmental limits. Force protection. Maintaining troop health and morale requires constant attention. Linke's accounts of frostbite, lice, and psychological breakdown show how quickly elite units can become combat ineffective through environmental attrition. Adaptability. Successful military organizations adapt to circumstances. The Wehrmacht's rigid adherence to inappropriate doctrine in Russian conditions guaranteed failure. The human dimension of war. Beyond professional military lessons, Linke's diary illuminates war's human costs. Individual agency. Even within totalitarian systems waging criminal wars, individuals retain moral choice. Linke's growing criticism of leadership, though limited to professional matters, shows independent thought persisting under extreme pressure. Psychological toll. Combat's mental effects appear throughout the diary. Linke's evolution from enthusiasm to exhaustion tracks classic combat stress patterns. His increasing obsession with physical comfort reveals psyche protecting itself through focus on immediate needs. Group dynamics. Military unit cohesion under extreme stress follows predictable patterns. Link documents his regiment's progression from elite confidence through growing doubt to final dissolution, a trajectory repeated across military history. Moral injury. Though Linke avoids explicit moral reflection, signs of ethical stress appear. His discomfort with scorched earth tactics, his us or them rationalization, his silence about larger war aims suggest suppressed awareness of participating in wrongful aggression. Contemporary relevance. Modern conflicts, though featuring different technology, echo themes from Linke's diary. Asymmetric warfare. The Wehrmacht's tactical superiority negated by Soviet strategic depth parallels modern conflicts where technological advantage fails against determined opponents on home ground. Cultural intelligence. German racial prejudice blinded them to Soviet capabilities. Modern militaries still struggle to understand opponents across cultural divides. Logistics in extended operations. Whether in Russia, 1941, or Afghanistan, 2001 to 2021, projecting power over vast distances remains supremely difficult. Supply lines determine operational limits. Human factors. Soldiers' physical and psychological limits haven't changed. Modern warriors suffer the same cold, exhaustion, fear, and moral stress as Linke's generation. Information operations. The gap between propaganda and reality. Linke documents persists. Modern militaries still struggle to maintain morale when official narratives diverge from ground truth. Ethical reflections. Linke's diary raises uncomfortable questions about moral responsibility in war. Following orders. Linke never questions the war's legitimacy, only its conduct. When does professional duty become moral complicity? Can soldiers separate tactical competence from strategic criminality? Ordinary participants. Linke appears decent within his limited sphere, caring for subordinates, maintaining professional standards. Yet he advanced Nazi aggression. How do ordinary people become instruments of evil systems? Moral awareness. Did Linke understand his participation in criminal war? His silence on larger issues might reflect censorship concerns, lack of awareness, or deliberate avoidance. What obligations do individuals have to recognize systemic evil? Post-war reckoning. Had Linke survived, How would he have processed his service? Would he have joined the clean Wehrmacht myth-making or acknowledged complicity? How do participants in defeated aggression construct livable post-war identities? The diary as literature. Beyond historical documentation, Linke's diary possesses literary qualities that enhance its impact. Narrative arc. The diary follows classic tragic structure: initial confidence, rising action through early victories, climax at Moscow, falling action through retreat, catastrophe in death. Though unintentional, this narrative shape gives the diary dramatic power. Character development. We watch Linke evolve from eager lieutenant to exhausted veteran. His changing concerns, from glory to survival, track his psychological journey. Secondary characters appear and vanish, casualties of war's attrition, imagery and symbol. Linke's descriptive passages create powerful images: frozen corpses in snow, burning villages against night skies, exhausted horses eating stable straw. Winter itself becomes a character, beautiful and deadly. Ironic juxtaposition. The diary's matter-of-fact tone recording extraordinary events creates persistent irony. Linke counts casualties while planning post-war education, maintains military formality while discipline collapses, quotes poetry while documenting brutality. Authentic voice. Unlike polished memoirs, the diary's immediate, unrevised nature preserves authentic voice. Grammar errors, incomplete thoughts, and emotional rawness enhance rather than diminish its power. Historical significance. Linke's diary contributes to our understanding of World War II in multiple ways. Primary source value. Contemporary accounts from junior officers are relatively rare. Most memoirs come from senior commanders or junior enlisted. Linke's middle perspective, high enough to understand operations, low enough to experience direct combat, provides unique insights. Social history. Beyond military operations, the diary illuminates Wehrmacht social dynamics, relationships between officers and men, front line versus rear area tensions, regular army versus Nazi party conflicts. These details reveal the German military as complex social organization rather than monolithic entity. Environmental history. Linke's obsessive weather documentation provides climate data for historical meteorology. His descriptions of terrain, vegetation, and seasonal changes contribute to environmental history of Western Russia. Medical history. Detailed accounts of frostbite, disease, psychological breakdown, and medical treatment under extreme conditions interest historians of military medicine. The diary documents field medicine's limits when overwhelmed by environmental casualties. Technological history. Observations about equipment performance in extreme conditions, radios failing, engines freezing, weapons malfunctioning, provide ground truth about period military technology's actual versus theoretical capabilities. Pedagogical applications. Educators find Linke's diary valuable for teaching multiple subjects. History classes. The diary brings World War II to human scale. Students connect with individual experience more readily than abstract statistics. Linke's gradual disillusionment parallels Germany's strategic trajectory. Literature studies. As unintentional literature, the diary demonstrates how extreme experiences generate powerful narrative. Students analyze how documentary prose achieves literary effect through accumulated detail and authentic voice. Ethics courses. The diary provokes discussion about individual responsibility within evil systems. Linka's apparent decency complicates simple good-evil binaries. Students wrestle with how ordinary people become complicit in extraordinary crimes. Military education. Professional military education uses the diary to illustrate timeless principles: logistics primacy, intelligence importance, environmental factors, human limitations. Linka's tactical observations support operational analysis. Psychology classes. The diary demonstrates combat psychology, stress responses, and adaptation mechanisms. Linka's psychological journey from confidence through doubt to exhaustion follows predictable patterns useful for understanding trauma. Memorialization and memory. How should we remember Linke and millions like him? Neither heroes nor simple villains, they defy easy categorization. Individual tragedy. At personal level, Linke's death at 28 represents pure waste. Intelligence and potential destroyed for a criminal cause he incompletely understood. Mourning individual loss while condemning collective action requires moral nuance, collective responsibility. While granting Linke individual humanity, we must remember he advanced Nazi aggression. Wehrmacht participation in criminal war cannot be excused by professional duty or personal decency. Both and rather than either or, moral judgment seems appropriate. Universal lessons. Linke's experience transcends national boundaries. Young men dying in wars they don't fully understand, following orders from distant leaders, suffering for abstract causes. These patterns repeat across cultures and centuries. Cautionary tale. The diary warns against military hubris, strategic overreach, and racial prejudice. Each generation must learn these lessons anew. Linke's frozen corpse in Russia joins Napoleon's Grande Armée in teaching respect for geography, climate, and enemy capabilities. Final reflections. Gerhard Linke's diary ensures one small piece of the Eastern Front's vast catastrophe remains accessible to human understanding. Through his eyes, we see what theoretical military history obscures: war's daily reality of discomfort, fear, confusion, and death. The young lieutenant who confidently invaded the Soviet Union discovered what millions before and after have learned: that war consumes individuals regardless of cause or capability. His transformation from professional soldier to desperate survivor illustrates war's essential truth. It destroys more than it creates, wastes more than it achieves, diminishes rather than ennobles. Yet from that destruction comes knowledge. Linke's diary teaches through negative example, showing what not to do, how not to think, why not to start wars of aggression. His suffering and death gain meaning only if future generations learn from his experience. The diary closes with Linke, sick and under attack, fate unknown but sealed. We know he died soon after, becoming one of approximately 30 million Eastern Front casualties. That staggering number defies comprehension, but through Linke's diary, we grasp what one of those deaths meant: a universe of experience, hope, and potential extinguished for nothing. In preserving and studying such documents, we honor not the cause for which Link fought, but the humanity he retained even while serving in humanity. His diary reminds us that history happens to individuals, that every casualty statistic represents irreplaceable human experience. The frozen lieutenant speaks across decades, his voice preserved in diary pages while his body vanished into Russian earth. His words warn against repeating the march to Moscow, literal and metaphorical, that brings only catastrophe. In that warning lies whatever redemption can emerge from participation in history's most terrible war. Linka's diary thus joins the chorus of voices from World War II, perpetrators and victims, victors and vanquished, all testifying to war's essential horror. Their combined witness argues more powerfully than any peace movement that war represents humanity's failure, not its glory. The lieutenant who dreamed of post-war education instead educates us through his destruction, teaching by terrible example that some victories cost more than any defeat. The diary ends, but its lessons endure. Each time we read Linka's progression from confidence to catastrophe, we learn again that war mocks human pretension, that suffering transcends sides, that individuals matter even when history treats them as abstractions. In those lessons lie Linka's inadvertent gift to posterity, not the victory he sought, but the wisdom his defeat provides. Don't forget to write the video. Also, write your opinion in the comments. Goodbye, everyone. See you all again.